Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammang sanghang namasami. Dear friends, today I propose to continue reading the chapter on Bhikkhunis from the Samyutta Nikaya. And this chapter was started last Sunday with Venerable Kachayana, who happens to be sitting here next to me. I'd like to ask Kachayana to briefly summarize what was discussed last time. I didn't have.
All right. Hello. I guess hopefully you can see me. I can't see you, but I imagine some of you were here last week. And if so, you can remember that we started reading the Bhikkhuni Samyutta, which is a chapter from the Samyutta Nikaya. It's a grouping of 10 short suttas, each of which is about an ancient Arahant Bhikkhuni at the time of the Buddha, confronting and defeating Māra. So we read the first 2 or 3 of these. And we talked about who is Māra. He's the sort of a trickster figure, really, but his name means death. And he comes to whisper in your ear about all the things that might keep you trapped in the round of death and rebirth, trying to convince you that they're important and more important than your meditation. Of course, all the Arahant Bhikkhunis see through this immediately and have a good response. So that's sort of a fun thing about this group of suttas. We looked at the Bhikkhuni Samyutta is immediately preceded by the Māra Samyutta. And we talked about that placement, that in the Māra Samyutta, that's another chapter. It has short suttas where Māra comes to confront the Buddha multiple times, again and again. And likewise, the Buddha always has a good answer for Māra. So just pointing out the placement that the Bhikkhunis are immediately following after that and having the same kind of answer, really, that the Buddha did. And this is part of our encouragement and inspiration that one can have an answer for Māra, but it's not just the Buddha. The first of the Bhikkhunis, I think she was talking about, Māra was whispering in her ear about sensual pleasures, and she was able to say, no, I'm no longer interested. Like the sensual pleasures are like a knife and the aggregates are the chopping block. So we talked about that shift in perspective of how we can perceive sensual pleasures. The next one, I think, is the Soma Samyutta, where the Bhikkhuni Soma, Māra says, Māra says, what are you doing? Why are you ordained? You're just a woman with only 2-fingered wisdom. And the Bhikkhuni Soma is able to say, well, what does womanhood matter at all? Anyone who would say, I'm a woman, or I'm a man, or I'm anything at all would be fit for Māra to address. So we talked about that both in terms of the gender dynamics at that time and presently, and also in terms of the more general sort of sense of identity, like giving up that sense of identity is a necessary step on the way to liberation from Māra. And then I don't think we actually read the Kisa Gotami Sutta, but I think Maureen was sort of looking ahead and brought in one of the lines from there about how the Bhikkhuni Kisa Gotami, Māra was asking, are you looking for a man? Do you want more sons? And she said, no, I'm done with sons. And that triggered a whole conversation about family relationships. And that was kind of a hot topic. There was very lively discussion about our embeddedness in relationship in the human world, and how does that fit in with our spiritual life? Do we just need to reject all of that, or is there a skillful way to bring it in? Is it actually skillful to reject it, or is that harmful? We did not resolve any of those questions, but we talked about it, and it was a lively conversation. And so that's what we did last time.
Our chapter.
Right. Seminary Satima, I don't know if you could hear that. She was pointing out another point I made, which is at the end of the Māra Samyutta, the last Samyutta is about Mara's daughters coming to tempt the Buddha. So his three beautiful young daughters come and try to tempt the Buddha to sensual pleasures, and he turns them down. And then, right, in the next chapter, we get to see the Bhikkhunis, the Arahant Bhikkhunis, who are in a way the Buddha's daughters, giving us a better example of how to practice. So just thinking, also pointing out that was an interesting way to end one samyutta and begin the next.
I hope if we manage to go through the remainder of the chapter today, we might notice a pattern that sometimes occurs. I've seen this in chapters of the Dhammapada, where the first few verses in the chapter are presenting a kind of a conundrum that's very difficult to reconcile, like the question about embeddedness in the family versus rejecting family life as a kind of a hard question to answer. And then at the end of the section, you see those things are resolved and clarified in terms of the pure Dhamma. Then the non-Vijaya robed up in the morning and sat at the root of the tree for the day's meditation. Then Māra, the wicked, wanting to make the non-Vijaya feel fear, terror, and goosebumps, wanting to make her fall away from immersion or samadhi, went up to her and addressed her in verse. You are so young and beautiful, and I'm a youth in my prime. Come, my lady, let us enjoy the music of a 5-piece band. Then the non-Vijaya thought, who's speaking this verse, a human or a non-human? Then she thought, this is Māra, the wicked, wanting to make me feel fear, terror, and goosebumps, wanting to make me fall away from samadhi or immersion. Then Vijaya, knowing that it was Māra, the wicked one, replied to him in verse. Sight, sound, taste, smells, and touch are so delightful. I hand them right back to you, Māra, for I have no use for them. This body is foul, decaying, and frail. I'm horrified and repelled by it. I've eradicated sensual craving. There are beings in the realm of luminous form, and others stuck in the formless. And also those peaceful attainments. I've destroyed the darkness regarding all of them. I think we could say here that the 5-piece band would be sight, sound, taste, smell, and touches. So the 5 senses are the 5-piece band. Or in Māra, in the form of a young lover, is inviting Vijaya to play. Then there's a contemplation, contemplation of the foulness of the body. putikayena. The body is foul, decaying, and frail. This is a specific kind of meditation that's recommended for celibate monastics who are suffering from their addiction to sex and having a tremendous struggle to maintain their celibacy because they fall into sexual desire, sexual arousal. Even for persons who have not made that commitment to the celibate lifestyle, if someone is suffering from sex addiction, one advice is if they would work in a hospice or in a hospital where they have a chance to be around people whose bodies are decaying or subject to illness, that facing up to that reality has a very salutary effect in cutting off that addictive tendency. We had a conversation about this this morning. This phrase where she says, "I'm horrified and repelled by the body." This is a phrase that we hear elsewhere with respect to unskillful, unwholesome states of mind. So a person who has abandoned the unwholesome states of mind in meditation and gained seclusion from kama tanha, from sensual desire, gained seclusion from unwholesome states of mind, then if they lose their samadhi and unwholesome mind states come up to them in the meditation, or even if one has had a opening of the Dhamma eye and had a great large portion of their desire, sensual desire and aversion has already fallen away, and they just have a very small, reduced level of sensual desire available, and just more like a subtle forms of craving still remaining as part of their psychology. Then that person who has gained the noble path, then seeing these more subtle levels of the defilements, will feel shocked and horrified and want to cut them off, cut them down, and get away from them. So we don't recommend that a person should be hateful towards the fact that we're alive and we have a human body. So we should not undertake torturing ourselves because we feel hateful towards our body, and we definitely should not undertake suicide because of feeling that the living body is hateful. That's not what the Buddha is recommending. But this phrase about being horrified and repelled and then eradicating sensual craving makes me think of it more in terms of the contrast of the seclusion from sensual craving and the seclusion from the unwholesome states that could be experienced in samadhi, and then much more so the great reduction but not complete separation from sensuality that could be experienced by one who has stream entry, who still can experience minor levels of desire and aversion.
Excuse me. What is the number in the book version, Bhikkhu Bodhis? What page number are you?
Oh, that's a good question.
I can't. I'm at 5, and I can't. I'm not finding the.
This is on page 224, Vijaya, verse 528. So I'll ask if there's any more thoughts or insight that persons have regarding the Vijaya Sutta, including anybody here in the room or anybody in online. Richard, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if this translation isn't, or the correct translation isn't more like, the body itself right at this moment isn't putrid and foul, right? But it will become putrid and foul due to the fact that it, decays and its frailty. So like at death, at death, the body will rot away and become putrid and foul. And just that idea, right, of being attached to this thing that's just going to become putrid and foul, right, is horrifying. You know what I mean? It's just like if you ever watch like an old monster movie or something, and a zombie or something comes up from the grave, and they're all like rotting flesh. You know what I'm saying? Scaring. So.
Yes.
But it's just an idea I had as I was looking at the Pali. I'm not 100% sure because again, I don't claim to be, a super Pali expert or anything like that. But it just struck me as that, because just to sort of, project something that isn't really completely true at that moment. You know what I mean? In such a strong language, but definitely will become true. At some point in time. You know what I mean? Seems a little bit overdone. And so in the same way, if you look at the Satipatthanas, right, Buddha talks about a gradual, right, wasting away of the body, right? Okay, it's dead, and then it starts to bloat or whatever, and then you know what I mean. And there's a whole thing of how it putrefies, and in like this pattern, right, at the time of death, And it's just an idea. I may be completely wrong.
Yes.
Someone may have some other view. Thank you very much.
The putrefying body would be a carrier of disease. And so at the practical samsaric human level, you would tend that you would not want to touch a rotten corpse because you would be naturally afraid of disease. And you definitely wouldn't want to eat it if it was rotten, and you wouldn't want to make love to it either way if it were rotten. But on the other hand, if you were practicing contemplation, you could have a very kind of a cool and objective attitude to observing what happens to the process of life as it goes through that active putrefaction stage and then turns to bones and dust and gradually disappears. And so you would be replacing that repulsive reaction to a reaction that's very cool, very objective, calm, and neutral towards the body, which again would be the opposite of being addicted to pleasure. Damon.
Couldn't you argue though that even before death, that even from birth on, I mean, there are unpleasant aspects to the physical body. It's constantly invaded by bacteria, and even if it's not dramatic, so that this could be contemplated in the human body, you know, way before death.
This reminds me of a friend of ours who's very, very sensitive to the inner processes of the body. They had a serious and longstanding gut infection that they had picked up while traveling in Asia, and were prescribed by a doctor to go on a very restricted diet so as to allow those predators inside the gut to die off without going to the extent of using antibiotics. And what my friend experienced was there was a kind of a genocide happening inside of her tummy, and all the little beings were saying, "Oh, we're dying, help us, we're dying." A different friend of ours had a similar condition but was not wise, and that person got this really strong habit of eating apples and brie cheese. And the thing is that the little worms, or the whatever they were, the bacteria in the belly, they loved the brie. And it wasn't that she was feeling, oh, brie was just delicious. It's like all the little beings in the belly were saying, yummy, 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 hooray, hooray, cheese, cheese. One can experience the natural tendencies of the body as still with, you kind of still have a choice of experiencing it in a neutral way, or experiencing in a way that's full of disgust, or experiencing in a way that's full of desire. It's sort of like up to you how you experience it. Maureen?
There. I agree. I think that probably the most wholesome way is to have try and maintain equanimity, and in viewing the body as it is, and then also we have a whole lot of, we live in harmony with a huge number of bacteria in our gut. And it's the imbalance of them that can be distressing. And also the gut actually does send messages to the brain, chemical messages, some of them, to make that actually control some of our reactions, you know, whether we're hungry or not hungry, or those kinds of things. But I think that it's the middle way that is the most wholesome way of looking at sensual stimulation, and not be attracted or repulsed, but realize that you're living in equanimity and a balanced way with all the other commensals inside our body, except for the frankly awful ones like tapeworms and things like that. But no, I do. The putrefying is a bit dramatic, and I think that balance is much better and easier, and probably a better way forward for us. Anyway.
This morning we were practicing the meditation on the elements with respect to the internal elements in the body. And one of us brought up detachment, how doing that meditation made her experience detachment from the elements of the body. And I feel that equanimity and detachment are two things that are kind of mutually supportive. So when we see that all the process of life that's happening inside the body is just part of the five aggregates, the process is doing its thing, it's creating pleasure and pain, or desire and repulsion. And this is just the five aggregates, the process of life, just doing its thing. And we don't have to be, we can experience that very clearly with a measure of detachment. Yeah. Okay, Maureen, you're going to answer me again. You're muted. You're muted.
Sorry. I just wanted to ask you about that last verse, 531. I don't quite understand what they're getting at then.
So they this recurs in several of the coming verses. So there's an association of what we experience with the realms of existence. So we are living in the kama loka, the realm of kama, the realm of sensual desire. Then there are other beings who are not in the kama loka, not in the realm of sensual desire, because they're in the fine material realm or in the formless realm. And they experience peace I see this translation. Let me look at his footnote, see what he says about it. According to the commentary, she's saying that delusion has been destroyed for her in all the realms. So even when she's practicing the jhana, the fine material meditation, or practicing the immaterial meditation, in those realms too, the darkness of delusion has been destroyed. I'll just jump back for a second to look at Bhante Sujata's translation. He makes it a little bit more clear. He says, there are beings in the realm of luminous form and others stuck in the formless. And also, these peaceful attainments, I've destroyed the darkness regarding all of them. So the way he translates the verse sort of pulls out the significance a little more clearly. I'll go to Maitri.
I wanted to ask, these are very powerful statements that turns Māra away without any back and forth. Wanted to ask if there was any other information you knew about this Bhikkhuni Vijaya. Certain Bhikkhunis are more famous in Bhikkhus and Bhikkhunis, like Patachara or Kisagotami. First time I'm hearing of Bhikkhuni Vijaya.
I didn't take the time in preparation for this to look up the biographies of the nuns. So I'm going to set that aside in the interest of going ahead. Okay, Emma has a question here. People can hear your question.
My question is, no, not the not to be crude, but why wouldn't an arahant kill themselves? Because if you're truly not attached to anything, including being alive, and the real goal is something that happens after you die, then if you're still living, then aren't you still attached to something, including just being alive itself? You know?
The arahant is perfectly neutral, does not have any inclination towards existence or towards non-existence. And because of that neutrality, they don't have the a need to commit suicide. Now, it is said that after the Buddha's parinibbana, quite a lot of the fully enlightened monks felt that there was not any point in continuing with existence, and they also entered their parinibbana, meaning the nibbana with the cessation of the living life form. And Mahayana criticizes them, the Theravada, saying that they're so selfish that after the Buddha passed away, all those fully enlightened monks should have had the desire to live for the long time for the welfare and benefit of sentient beings, to save the other beings by teaching them and expounding the Dhamma. The Buddha did recommend that bhikkhus should expound, explicate, point out, and speak about the Dhamma for their own welfare and for the welfare of beings. So that's definitely recommended. And meditation is the pleasant abiding of the fully enlightened arahant. But you should not feel that they have being equanimous is being in the middle and allowing nature to follow its course. So it's like if I've got my ego is controlling what happens to me, then I have a choice. But if I've realized non-self and a self-centered part has stepped aside, then even the process of awakening is not something that's done by like, I myself have grasped this, I have attained this, I have reached this. Instead, there's a point at which even the process of full enlightenment is the kind of a stepping aside from grasping and stepping aside from ignorance, stepping aside from all kinds of desires and clinging. And then enlightenment itself is almost like an impersonal process of nature. So if you've done that, then whatever residual karma that you have, that means you still got a living body and you still got whatever is involved with having a living body. You just allow that process to go on. So. Yeah, let's look at another verse. Uppalavana's verse, I think we spoke about this during one of the programs. We definitely spoke about this recently, so we're just reviewing it again. We've already discussed it. So Uppalavana is standing at the foot of the sal tree in full flower. Māra, the wicked one, wanting to make her feel fear, terror, and goosebumps, went up to her and addressed her in verse. You've come to this sal tree, all crowned with flowers, and stand at its root all alone. O nun, your beauty is second to none. Silly girl, aren't you afraid of rascals? And then Upalavana recognizes that it's Māra. And she replies, even if 100,000 rascals like you were to come here, I'd stir not a hair, nor panic. I'm not scared of you, Māra, even alone. I'll vanish, or I'll enter your belly. I could stand between your eyebrows, and you still couldn't see me. I'm the master of my own mind. I've developed the basis of psychic power well. I'm free from all bonds. I'm not afraid of you, sir. Then Māra, the wicked one, thinking the nun Upalavana knows me, miserable and sad, vanished right here. We may recall that Upalavana was a famous beauty. So many noble men were competing to have her hand in marriage that her father was afraid there would be a war. And he had the idea of letting her become a bhikkhuni in order to avoid conflict by choosing one of the sutras over the other ones. And then in her long subsequent story, there's a great amount of mythology that evolved around Upalavana and gender. There's a story in the Mahayana where after the Buddha had taught his stepmother in heaven, in Tusita heaven, he taught the Abhidhamma to his mother, Maya. And when the Buddha is coming down the stairway back down to earth, Upalavana wanted to be the first one to greet and to bow and pay respects to the Buddha. So she changed into a wheel-turning king. So she changed her gender and her status in order to have the privilege of being the first one to greet the Buddha. So there are many statues where you see the king and a nun bowing down to the Buddha who's coming down a staircase. And that's what those images are about. The danger of violence at the hand of scoundrels would be part of the samsaric suffering related to our worldly culture and cultural norms regarding women, that an independent woman alone in the forest, I guess in those times would be considered somebody who was asking for trouble, or somebody who was, possibly a prostitute or something like that. So then through her meditative concentration, she's transcending those worldly conditions. It's said that Richard was mentioning this last time we discussed it. It said that when a person is in jhana, in full samadhi, sama samadhi, they are invisible to Māra. And what that means is they've obtained seclusion from sensual desire, seclusion from unwholesome states of mind. And in that case, Māra is a kind of a personification of those unwholesome states of mind. While you're in jhana, those states are not able to touch you. You're secluded from them, and in that way, invisible to Māra. So you get to experience during samadhi what a relief it is to know there's a place that you could go anytime, which is secluded from unwholesome states of mind. You know, we've been talking about like safety. What is creating a safe space for practice or a safe place for existence? How difficult it is to thrive when one is feeling, you know, in danger of harm, how much attention and difficulty that's creating. So to know that in samadhi, there is actually, in a very real sense, this is the safe space. And one can go there anytime if you know how to practice jhana. One can, at least during that time, have that seclusion from the unwholesome states, and Māra cannot reach you in that place. And then that's a sort of a anticipating what then with enlightenment becomes a permanent state, because the enlightened person who's still alive is excluded, separated, detached from all of those unwholesome states. So now I invite any comments about Upalawana. Okay, Emma, again.
That's my own. That's it. I said, why would the Buddha greet the king first?
Why does the Buddha greet the king first? Enlightenment, that's such an interesting question, isn't it? So others may have a different idea about this. My idea about that would be that the living Sangha in this world, it's a liminal situation or a boundary line between the mundane samsaric existence and the ultimate realities. So when the Buddha set up the Sangha, he set up the Sangha to be in touch with the rest of humanity, to be connected by means of alms food and so forth, and also to have a teaching which is beneficial to people who are still caught up and trapped in their samsaric considerations. As far as I can tell, Indian society was very was hierarchical, in the sense that it was considered that a person who was living in a fortunate circumstance, it would be because they had a lot of merits in the previous lifetime. So being lucky and being good were very much tied together in people's mind. And so they thought that the kings were naturally good, and enjoying the fruit of their previous good deeds, although they might or might not continue to do good deeds while they're kings. But in samsara, the king has the right to get in the front of the line. Now, there are many other stories. There are other stories. On one occasion, there was an untouchable person who was sweeping the street, and he saw the Buddha and a group of monks coming, and was feeling ashamed. And they're not allowed to be on the street when high caste people are walking by. So, but there was a wall, so he couldn't get off the street. so he kind of like crouched up against the wall and tried to make himself almost invisible. And the Buddha greeted him courteously and invited him to come and join the Sangha. And then on the other occasion, his charioteer, who would have been a servant of the family, had returned. He had taken the horse and the jewelry back to return them to the family, and then he immediately came back wanting to ordain as a bhikkhu. But then some of the Buddha's other cousins also came along wanting to ordain. So there were several young men of the noble family and this one servant who all came back requesting to ordain. And just to prove a point, the Buddha ordained his servant first, and he ordained his cousins afterwards, so that then for the rest of their natural life, the servant would have a slightly higher seniority than the others. So the Buddha did say that within the ordained Sangha, those social distinctions disappear, but outside of the Sangha in the world, those social distinctions are still present. And he was not a revolutionary. He didn't try to overturn the social order that existed at the time. Okay. Maureen, and then Ananaya.
I'm looking at the verse where she calls them 1,000 rogues. And isn't that more likely to be a metaphor for all the temptations and delusional, ignorant approaches to, the temptations, rather than actual real people? Because I thought that in early Buddhism, he realized that the nuns would have to have some kind of protection.
Well, this was before that rule had been laid down.
Oh.
And so there were nuns who were going out by themselves.
Mm.
And they got raped.
Yeah.
And then he made the rule that they were not allowed to go by themselves to places that were regularly known to be dangerous.
Yeah. So
both things are true.
Yeah. You see what I'm saying, though, that it's
yeah.
Sorry.
It certainly is also a metaphor for all of the diverse afflictions that we have to suffer in this life. Yeah.
Thank you.
Ananaya.
This is just a point of clarification. I've checked this a couple different times on BBC's website, etc. The actual caste system did not get started in India till 1500 BCE. So it was hierarchical for sure before then, but the formal system wasn't put in place. And it said that it actually got formalized as we know it around 1500 with the arrival of the Aryan tribes that ultimately went through and, kind of took over or whatever. So it's more question of semantics, because in fact, it formalized and really stratified the system by 1500, but certainly there was class distinctions before that time.
I believe that in the early Buddhist texts, there's reference to the 4 groups of the warriors, the Brahmins, the artisans, and the workers. Untouchables did not exist at that time. Oh, so how do I know a story about someone who's? That's very interesting. So I heard an anachronistic story. I'll have to now research this and find out what it's in reference to. Uh-huh.
Someone who is like a street sweeper or something.
Yeah.
You'll consider very low.
Yeah,
Maybe not like the formalized.
yeah. So
Could
the
you
people
repeat
that
what
were
you
involved in
said?
picking up the garbage are doing the butchering and things like that. Hmm.
Well, you
Uh,
can, I mean, it's easily, if you Google it, it'll pop right up. I mean, and it's clear that it didn't, as we know it in the very specific stratifications occurred after the Buddhist
Yeah.
time, considerably after. But
Oh.
that they had hierarchy was for
Yeah.
sure. They did definitely have separations between the various classes, as it were.
the full development of the caste system for sure developed later.
Yes.
Richard.
Thank you. It seemed like the person who was just speaking was saying 1500 BCE. Isn't that before? Because Buddha was around 500, right? So the
Yes.
caste system would have already
No,
developed for
no.
like 900 years or something.
Well, here.
I thought I heard you say BCE. I was listening very hard to make sure.
I did say 1500 BCE, and hang on just a second because I've got the thing right here, if I may.
Also, some of the untouchables came from the non-Aryan groups of like the hill tribes and stuff, which even all
Even
over
today.
Asia, we see in developed countries, a lot of
Yeah.
them still have hill tribes, things like that,
Yeah.
you know, who are outside normal culture.
Certainly, there's a very interesting book by Bronkhorst about ancient Magadha and what society was like in the Buddhist time. Certainly, there would have been Aboriginal peoples who had their own meditation and religious traditions that infiltrated into Buddhism as well. There were the Khattiya or the warrior class who were invaders, and then there was the Brahmin group, which, according to Bronkhorst, was not really that dominant in the area where the Buddha was teaching, but was dominating in some other nearby areas. This is a whole other area for discussion. But I'm pretty sure that in the Buddhist time, there definitely were four, at least the four major levels of society, and their status might have been more fluid than in later times. We know that there was, for example, a lot of uncertainty. Somebody who was a merchant could easily lose their wealth and become a slave as a result of debt. So there was some shifting around. Damon. Yeah, go, Richard.
It's Richard. I wanted to talk about something else, but I just was bringing up that point that should have been established for several, maybe 1,000 years, whatever. So when we go back to that, though 100,000 rogues, just like you may come here, I stir not a hair, I feel no terror. Even alone, Māra, I don't fear you. So when you go towards the end, she says, I am the master of, it's translated here, I'm looking at Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. I am the master of my mind, but actually the word in there in the Pali is chitta, which means state of mind. And because she's totally mastered her state of mind and can hold any state she wants, that's why she does not fear, has no terror and all those things, because she's able to keep an enlightened, state of mind. You see what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yes.
So And these other things here, like I can make myself disappear. Well, as you mentioned, from Mara's site, she can, enter the jhana. She says, or here it says, I can enter inside your belly. I think it's kind of like we say in Europe, being in the belly of the beast. Well, this is Mara's realm, right? So I'm right here, right? But you're not going to scare me. Nothing's, I'm right here in your midst, right? What can you do against me? Or he says, I can stand between your eyebrows. That may have been like a colloquial saying, like, when someone is directly right in front of you, right? You can't avoid seeing them because, your eyes are coming to that point, which is, between your eyebrows, right? Boom, there they are, right? Yet you won't catch a glimpse of me again, entering into the jhana, my physical body may be there, but, you don't really see me, it doesn't mean anything. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to throw that in there.
Okay.
May not be complete or true, but that's just food for thought.
Damon, and then we'll go on to the next verse.
Yeah, no, all good comments. So far, might you agree that this is like the most dramatic kind of narrative of the power of the Bhikkhuni? I mean, for me, next time I'm in a bad mood, I'll certainly channel my inner Bhikkhuni. It really was just so inspiring. Thank you.
Good. You're welcome. I'm going to jump ahead to number 9, which is the Sela. Sela was sitting at the foot of the tree for the days abiding. Māra, the evil one, wanting to arouse fear, trepidation, and terror, wanting to make her fall away. Addressed her in verse. By whom has this puppet been created? A puppet is called a bimba. A bimba could be a doll or an image. By whom has this puppet been created? Where is the maker of this puppet? Where has this puppet arisen? Where does the puppet cease? And then Sela's, knowing that this is Māra, the evil one, replies in verse. This puppet is not made by itself, nor is this misery made by another. It has come to be dependent on a cause. With the cause's breakup, it will cease. As when a seed is sown in a field, it grows depending on a pair of factors. It requires both the soil's nutrients and the steady supply of moisture. Just so, the aggregates and elements and these 6 bases of sensory contact have come to be dependent on a cause. With the cause's breakup, they will cease. There are several things in this verse that I find interesting. One is that Sela's answer is not referring to a self or an atta. It's referring to a bimba or an image. So there is the image of the individual. So she's saying this about the image of an individual, but not about a self. If someone had said this about the self, that would be the materialist philosophy or the annihilationist philosophy that says that when the conditions that support the beginning of life cause the self to come into existence, and when those conditions end and the life is finished, then the self goes out of existence. But because it's a bimba and not a self, she's pointing out how just an appearance in imagery seems to come into existence and seem to cease. Or you could say that this self, this bimba, it's an aggregated thing, and that an individual, meaning like a flesh and blood person or a flesh and blood sentient being, it is, in one way, it's a real actuality of a real thing, but it's just something that has an appearance in the flow of causation. And so in this way, Sela is resolving some of the dilemmas that we talked about before, like you're a woman with two-fingered wisdom. What right do you have for awakening? Or saying you're don't you long for children and the husband? Don't you long for that situation or that status in society? Or saying because of your beauty and your, again, the social status that makes you the object of rogues. So this understanding of the apparent of the form, having the form of a woman, is just an appearance that arises because of causes. The other thing that I like about this, sometimes you hear that the aggregates are the totality of a person, and sometimes you hear that the six sense fields are the all, everything that can be known. And here, in this case, this verse is mentioning the aggregates, the elements, and the six sense fields as it's like three different slices or ways of experiencing what we experience as the self. So any of those three groups or all of it together becomes this bimba, this puppet, this image. And being detached, we don't need to be disturbed. Not being disturbed, we relinquish all of the attachments and experience freedom. So I invite any comments about Sela's verse. Okay, Richard.
Bhikkhu Bodhi has a note about this in 358, and he references the section 12, 17, 18, and a few others. What do you say here? Sorry, I looked away. 17, 18, 24, and 25. And for dealing with this issue that you mentioned about eternalism or nihilism. And the first one, 17, this naked ascetic comes up and asks him, Does the self create its own suffering, or what? You know, it's like these four basic questions. And the Buddha, I don't want to go into too much detail; it's too long. But so one of the initial things is the Buddha says is that you might put it this way: the five khandhas themselves, this body itself, right, is experiencing suffering. You know, it's a natural occurrence, right, to warn you, you know, oh, don't touch the hot stove or whatever, you know. You're only experiencing that pain because you're wrongly identifying with the body. so that's why that suffering is not created by yourself. It's a bunch of causes, you know, all, you know, which has come up in the manifestation as the five khandhas, you know, and it's only due to your mana, your misidentification, you know, with that body as yourself. Due to you know, avidya, that you're experiencing that pain and identify, oh, I'm in pain, right? But in reality, no, it's just a natural function, you know, of a living body for self-preservation, you know, to experience that, etc. Yeah, anyways, I didn't want to discuss it too much because I think it's too extensive, but since you mentioned that one point, I thought I'd bring it up. Thank you.
Thank you. I really love the way these fully enlightened speakers have integrated what they know so thoroughly that it can be, the truths that they're pointed to can be conjured up with an image like the soil, the seed with the soil and the nutriments and the moisture, providing the conditions for the plant to arise out of that seed. And so then the image is so direct, so memorable, and so helpful to us that it can be much easier to recollect an image like that. Like the image itself is like a little sermon contained in one picture, and that's very useful and helpful to us in our practice. When we have the same teaching given in a more abstract philosophical or discursive terms, it becomes, for this mind anyway, sometimes difficult to keep it all together. But the images are really, really helpful and can become, you know, like I don't know what that are. These helpful images and stories are like the angels that are helping us to stay on the right track with our practice, because they're so easy to reach out and, you know, take a hold of them when we need them. In our last minutes, I want to look at the last sutta in this sequence. This is Vajira. Māra wanted to make the nun feel fear, terror, goosebumps, wanted to make her fall away from samadhi, from meditation, went up to her and said, "Who created this sentient being?" In this case, sutta is the word Pali for the being. Where is its maker? Where has the being arisen? Where does it cease? And recognizing that this is Māra, Vajira replied, Why do you believe there's such a thing as a sentient being? Māra, is this your theory? This is just a pile of conditions. You won't find a sentient being here. When the parts are assembled, we use the word chariot. So too, when the aggregates are present, sentient being is the convention we use. But it's only suffering that comes to be, lasts a while, then disappears. Naught but suffering comes to be. Naught but suffering ceases. And then Māra, the wicked one, thinking the nun Vajira knows me, miserable and sad, vanishes right here. This last paragraph, it's only suffering that comes to be and disappears, is then very much reminiscent of the Four Noble Truths. What the Buddha taught was only suffering and the cessation of suffering. Bhikkhu Bodhi also has a note about this one. The simile of the chariot is elaborated in the Milindapana, the questions of King Milinda, which quotes this verse. And also it's quoted in the Visuddhimagga. Suffering is the inherent unsatisfactoriness of the five aggregates. Pancha Khandha Dukkha. Sometimes you hear the Upadana Khandha, the khandhas of clinging, which is referring to that clinging to existence, which is creating the fuel for rebirth and for continuing around on the wheel of samsara because of upadana. So these five aggregates, which is one way to summarize an individual person, have that quality of, in my theory, they have the quality of sticking together. In that way, they're sort of clinging to each other, or the consciousness is clinging with identification to the other four, the body, the feelings, the perceptions, and the volitional formations are all being bound up with a kind of a diluted consciousness. And then another way of thinking of it is five aggregates of dukkha. That's another expression that we see for this. What arises is only suffering that arises. What ceases is only suffering ceasing. So this is a way of having something other than thinking that it's a self that arises and a self that ceases. Just thinking that it's dukkha that arises and dukkha that ceases. Or it's clinging that arises and clinging that ceases. Those two statements are virtually the same kind of statement. You can't have clinging without dukkha. You can't have dukkha without clinging. It's sort of like in the definition where craving ceases is where it's not held to. So I invite your comments on Vajira's beautiful metaphor and the beautiful poem.